I appreciate everybody for tuning in. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about Delta, the plane crash where the plane flipped over and the wing broke off. And more importantly, we're going to talk about a $30,000 payout that Delta paid, offered to everyone on the plane. The question is, should they take it? Can they take it? What is the legal cause of action that they are going to argue when they sue Delta? Because believe me, there will be the lawsuit. So we're going to dive in. As always, my name is Marcus. Here I do attorney reactions to current events, trending news, and other topics. Hey, if you aren't subscribed to the channel, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. But first, just stay tuned. You might find something that you like. And if you do, subscribe, like, share, comment. Because I looked at the algorithm, okay? Let's just keep it a buck. I looked at the algorithm, and like 70% of the people who watch are not subscribed. So if you could do me a favor, it's free 99 and it don't cost you nothing. Definitely subscribe to the channel. And always got to toss out the disclaimer, licensed attorney, but not your attorney. So this isn't legal or financial advice. I just had to look at something on the screen. This is just me giving my opinion and take on current events and topics. If you are looking for a legal professional, find one in your area. Never listen to a talking head on YouTube, even if it's your boy. Okay, let's go ahead in. We got a few videos we're going to watch because I want y'all to get some of the technical background of what happened, what mistake was likely or could have been made. Then we're going to watch a brief discussion about the payout, and we're going to talk about all of that. Let's go ahead, dive in. Let's get it.
It's hard to imagine how a plane can completely roll over when its entire design is intended to keep it stable and upright. The wings generate lift, but importantly, equal lift on both sides. And the weight distribution on a plane is very carefully considered to help preserve this balance. Where you put the luggage, where you put the fuel, where you put the passengers. But what happens when one of those wings snaps off? We can see from photos of the crash, at least one wing has been sheared right off. And we can see from this vantage point how that right wing was driven hard into the ground as the plane began tilting. The fire? That's likely from the fuel.
The wings sever right away upon impact. Imagine the wings with all the fuel tanks in there. If it's still intact after the impact, it could have turned into a fireball.
For that reason, that separation might have been the best possible thing that could have happened at that moment. And that's by design, because it keeps the cabin, where all the people are, from itself catching fire or even ripping apart entirely. But if you...
All right, we're going to watch another minute, but the Reader's Digest version is plane coming to a landing, may or may not have been crosswinds blowing. The plane, and I'm a nerd. I looked at videos like, oh man, how do planes fly? Even before this, because I just like stuff like that because I'm a dork. But planes, based on their design, the air that passes underneath the plane provides the lift. So when the plane was landing, it was low, arms out like this. I look crazy. I'm a little teapot. Arms is out like this. It's low. Crosswind comes, catches under the wing, lifts the plane up. The plane turns. This wing breaks because that's what it is supposed to do to protect the action cabin of the plane. And when this wing breaks, when this wing breaks, the lift continues on this side and the plane just flips over. Long story short, but let's finish watching for another minute. Then we're going to jump into what the arguments are going to be.
You lose one wing, the other takes over, and that's not good.
That the right wing is missing. It's not attached to the airplane. That means that the left wing is still producing lift.
Consider a plane making a routine landing. Two wings intact. Plane stays upright. But when that same plane, for whatever reason, tilts violently to one side, enough for one wing to make contact with the ground and separate entirely, that other wing is still flying. As you just heard, it's generating lift, and it's throwing the whole plane out of whack.
We skidded like on our side and then flipped over on our back. There was like a big fireball out this left side of the plane.
And I don't know if y'all have ever been on a plane when there's been like excessive turbulence. I think we were going to Hawaii. We taking the kids were going somewhere. This turbulence was so bad. Like literally, I just like kind of grabbed my daughter and held her because I mean, it was as if somebody was grabbing you and shaking you. So I know that was scary as hell. I'm glad everybody survived, and I hope the people that are in the hospital recover.
And when we got finished, it was I was upside down. Everybody else was there as well.
We can see the plane, in this case, rolling towards the wing that makes contact with the ground. And take a look at this moment where the plane is 90 degrees on its side. Imagine if there's any kind of crosswind at all on that wing, it would be exerting a force in the same direction the body of the plane is already rotating. That wing then crashes into the ground on the other side of the plane.
Okay, so that is the video of what happened. Now, the initial reports came out that there were winds, crosswinds, nothing outside of the scope that would have caused it to be anything dangerous. So let's take a look right now, because right now this is an interview with a former military pilot who's explaining, and he's probably going to be called up, or someone with his qualifications, as a witness for the plaintiffs in this case. Let's go ahead and take a look or listen at what he saw. Now, again, the initial reports, no crosswinds. Like, the argument really was that it was an act of God. If there's an act of God, you can't have a viable negligence claim because it was an act of God. It was a rando, isolated event. Let's take a listen to what this military pilot is saying, and then we're going to talk about the money that's being offered, the claims, and then it's going to get interesting.
Okay, so the very latest on that Delta plane crash, as we know, all 80 people on board that flight from Minneapolis to Toronto yesterday afternoon survived. You've probably seen the images or the video of that plane flipped upside down on its back while it was coming in for a landing at Pearson International Airport.
We're going to fast forward a little bit.
Have seen these videos. Some of them have heard some of the limited audio transmissions that have been out there. And, all of these folks have had an experience in the air in that type of aircraft. Maybe not this type of incident, but they know the protocol. They know what should happen in a case like this. So joining me now is Matthew Buckley, a decorated fighter pilot who also flew commercial planes like the one that crashed yesterday in Toronto. Thanks so much for joining us, Matthew.
Thanks for having me, Amy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so when you heard about this yesterday, just early on, what were some of the first thoughts that you had?
Amy, anytime there's an aviation mishap, military or civilian, the first thing I do is grab my cell phone and I look at one of my aviation apps, in this case, ForeFlight, because I want to check out the weather immediately to see if that was a contributing factor. Obviously, the weather yesterday, clear, wasn't clouds or anything like that, but very windy, very gusty conditions, and obviously with drifting and blowing snow, but very, very gusty conditions. So I'm going to take issue with, I don't know who you quoted or whatever official that was. They could not have been more wrong. There was absolutely a significant crosswind.
Again, remember what I said? The early reports, they said there were no crosswinds or very low within the range where the pilot can maneuver. This former pilot for the military is saying significant crosswinds. So this is going to be an issue. So everybody on that plane is going to lawyer up. There's going to be a negligence lawsuit filed. We talked about negligence before, the elements. Duty, you breached that duty. Damages, and your breach of the duty was the cause of the damages, the proximate cause. Those are essentially the four elements. There's some other stuff in there, but those are essentially the four elements. Now, he says significant crosswinds. Let's play a little bit more in detail. Then we're going to jump to the $30,000 payment.
It really does show more close up the plane coming in and touching the ground. And then can you describe what's happening there? And as you look at that, what are your thoughts?
I mean, my immediate thoughts were that was an aircraft carrier landing. So I flew the F-18 Hornet for the Navy, and our rate of descent touching down aboard an aircraft carrier is about 800 feet per minute. That's like sitting in your driveway in your car and having a crane take you up to the second story and then dropping you. And the F-18 is designed for landing aboard the carrier. If you see a carrier aircraft up close, the landing gear are pretty beefy. They're meant for this. The last data that I saw for this aircraft was 1,100 feet per minute rate of descent. So it literally looked like a landing aboard an aircraft carrier. And clearly, regional jet landing gear are not stressed for this type of landing. So that was my immediate takeaway. And also, obviously, on an airliner, once you get close to the runway, you pull the nose back a little bit, you reduce the power to do a nice soft landing. They did not flare at all. This was just a constant angle of attack to touchdown.
And so,
and you can see,
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and you can see what immediately happens. A little bit of a right wing down, and they slam onto the runway. The right main landing gear shears off. I mean, that's completely destroyed. That's going to break off the right wing. The only wing that's left is the left wing, and that's still creating lift. So that's why you get the roll. That's why the airplane rolled, is because that left wing was actually still flying, so to speak, and that's why the fuselage ended up falling.
Okay, he just laid out the argument for the plaintiff that someone was negligent. They came in essentially too hot. They didn't execute the maneuvered landing properly, which led to this incident actually happening. Let's go ahead and watch a little bit more, then we're going to talk about the money.
So what would cause a pilot, or what would cause that situation where you've got that really hard crash type landing? Why did it get to that point? Or what was happening possibly beforehand?
Well, Amy, that's $1 million question. Sadly, 70 to 80% of civilian aviation mishaps are pilot error. In that cockpit, the pilot not flying, once they saw that rate of descent start really picking up, should have added go around power. They should have went to max power immediately to go around and try it again. You have enough fuel. It just makes no sense to try and salvage a landing like that. So unless something crazy comes out of the woodwork here, looking 99.9% chance that this is a pilot error.
Yeah. And
okay, so he just laid the foundation for the negligence case for the plaintiffs, who are going to be all 80 passengers should file lawsuits. Those people are traumatized. It's some people doing interviews. They may not be injured. And y'all know my position. When you've been involved in an incident that could result in litigation, do not talk to anyone. Don't post on social media. Don't do anything. But those people are traumatized. You're going to have people who are going to be scared to fly. People who are going to be scared and develop PTSD being in small places. People who are afraid to be in groups. Loud noises. It's going to be a mess. Not to mention the emotional distress, the therapy to get through all of that. Hey, I really feel bad for the people who had to go through this. Now we're going to take a listen to the payments. We're going to talk about the payments, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about this cause of action. And I want to know, hey, are you taking a payment? Would you sue? Is $30K enough? We're going to discuss.
Thanks for joining us. Today, only one person injured in Monday's Delta plane crash remains hospitalized.
Within the last hour or two, some breaking news. We learned Delta is now offering $30,000 to survivors of that crash. Delta says the money comes with no strings attached. However, some passengers
don't believe it. The money comes with no strings attached. I absolutely, hold on. Let me make my face big for this one. I 100% guarantee you the $30,000 that was offered was not just given in a check or a bunch of money orders or sent on Cash App or Zelle. I guarantee you there were documents where they actually had to sign something, and after signing, they then got the funds. So they say it's just out the kindness of their heart. I think it's cap. There's a way to get around it if someone does, in fact, take this money. And I'm assuming there's a condition attached. Delta may just be the most upstanding company in the world. But let's go ahead and finish watching this, and then I'm going to discuss.
tell us their gratitude is mixed with frustration. Adam Duxter has been following this story and talking with passengers today. Adam, what have you learned?
Oh, Frank, you can only imagine the week that these folks have been through, but now a new twist. I've had a chance to look at the offer sent to every passenger on board that flight, a one-time $30,000 gift that Delta says comes no strings attached and doesn't impact passenger rights. In that offer, it's written that passengers must accept the agreement by March 6th. The fine print says it's a message provided on a confidential basis, and that by accepting the email, they are then prompted to a terms and conditions agreement, thousands of words in length. Schwabel Getz & Sieben, a personal injury firm based in Minneapolis, says they've already been contacted by a number of passengers that were on that flight about potential representation even before these payments came forward. And they say passengers aboard this flight certainly have the right to compensation.
Airlines like Delta or others have a heightened duty of care. They're a common carrier under our law, which means they have a heightened duty beyond just what the normal person has. Our law allows for these individuals.
And we talked about that before. I just got to talk in between these videos because YouTube be tripping. But we talked about that before. Generally, it's called the innkeepers. Innkeepers, people who house civilians, people who house customers, have a higher duty of care. And that innkeeper provision, even though it's sounding like it's talking about a hotel, that same legal logic is applied to passengers on a train, on a plane, because they are housing the public. Their service is to provide accommodations, comfort, to get people from point A to point B. If it's a hotel, so that you can be comfortable in your accommodation. So the standard is a little bit higher. So that's just the innkeeper's application for a standard of care being applied for airline purposes because they're serving the public, and the public has an expectation that I'm in good hands.
To be compensated for the emotional trauma that they went through, both the experience of living this, but the aftermath.
And prior to this payout announcement today, we'd heard from passengers frustrated by what they say up until that point was a lack of communication from Delta. It's clear prior to this, there had been no communication about potential payout. In a statement, Delta says today that they're also assisting customers with hotels, meals, and transportation, as well as other personal needs, and that they'll start reuniting people with their belongings as soon as they're able to. That sorting and cleaning everything that was left on board that plane could take some time, even weeks. And as far as any potential lawsuit, there should there be one, that attorney we spoke with tells us it would take until after the investigation into the crash itself is complete.
Yeah.
And so far, we don't know the timeline as to how long that could take.
Yeah, well, a lot to sort out still for sure. Thanks, Adam. And we have more news as the investigation into the crash continues. The CEO of Delta says that flight crew was experienced.
Our Endeavor crew performed heroically, but also as expected. This is what we train for. All these pilots train for these conditions. They fly under all kinds of conditions at all the airports in which we.
Okay, so we see the argument now. Delta is going to say exactly what this guy said. Our flight crew experience, all of our pilots are trained on these situations. The crosswinds, minimal or within the standard that the pilot could reasonably operate. The plaintiff's attorney are going to say exactly what that former military pilot said. This was an error made on behalf of the pilot. He should have been able to identify that he was coming in too hot. It would have been too much for his commercial landing gear because this isn't a military landing gear that's a little bit more solid and sturdy. He had enough fuel in the plane where his training should have taught him, we're going to circle around the airport one more time and come back around to see if we can land this landing properly. Now, the question is the $30,000. Will you take it? Delta may just be cool as hell. Okay. And if Delta's cool as hell and just giving everybody $30,000 with no questions, take it. Absolutely take it. But I can't see them giving somebody something. Even if they gave you something and no strings attached, it would be legal language saying that there's no strings attached. So they had to have been something. Now, let's assume that they're giving them the $30,000, but they're finessing something in the fine print where a person may waive their right to legal lawsuits. The question would be, is this valid? Could they get out of it? The answer is probably going to be yes, but it depends. If I were a passenger on the plane, I go to the hospital. I'm doing okay considering the circumstances. Delta offers me $30,000. And in this scenario, we're assuming that there's language in there that kind of bars me from bringing subsequent litigation. In that particular instance, if I go get an attorney to look over that thing, and the attorney is like, hey, he explains everything to me and I sign it. If there is language in there that bars my ability to bring a lawsuit, I'm probably going to be screwed because I had counsel. Now, if you just take it and you don't have counsel, even if there is language in there, you probably can get around that. And it's a concept, a legal concept in contract law called undue influence. It's exactly what it sounds like, co-counsel. Undue influence means that I'm entering into a contract with you and I'm coming from a stronger position and you are coming from a weaker position. What's your weaker position? This contract that we're assuming it has some terms in there where they won't be able to sue, even though Delta said that's not the case, but this is just for the legal lesson. I had my attorneys at Delta drafted the language. They probably put it in the fine print. They probably made it ridiculous legally so that a layperson will have to read it 15 times to be able to understand the nature and what they're actually getting into or giving up their ability to bring a lawsuit. I'm in a position of strength. How would the plaintiffs be in a position of weakness? They were in a traumatizing event. They may have sustained some type of head injury. They aren't trained as attorneys. They didn't have time to get an attorney. They were out of work, so they were losing money. So they had to make a decision under the duress of financial influence. So even if a person does take the $30,000, if we're assuming that the $30,000 had language in there to bar their lawsuit in the future, they would probably be able to get out of that provision due to undue influence. But Delta said, hey, we just giving y'all 30 racks just cause, and y'all can still bring the lawsuit. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Do y'all think this is genuine on Delta's behalf? Or do you think that Delta may have did some good old fashioned attorney gamesmanship? For now, I'm going to take them at their word that they're being a good company, a good corporation, which rarely happens. And they probably made billions of dollars in profits because flight's expensive as hell. Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed this video, check out the content on the screen. There's going to be more content related to attorney reactions. Peace.